approval of a continued funding augmentation application to U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Justice programs relating to drug court services in the county. So I have a few questions of the department. Hi.
Hi. I'm Stacy Cryer, the Public Health Branch Director, and I've brought Trish Gutley, who is the AODP Director.
Good, thank you. The concerns I have are certainly not of support for the drug court. So maybe you could explain how this funding is going to be used. I know it notes here that there are no additional personnel. This 25% in-kind county match, all of that seems good to draw down federal dollars. But maybe you could explain how this augmentation will be utilized and where it will be utilized, meaning specifically geographically in the county.
This is an enhancement grant to enhance our current drug court system. We went after this grant specifically at the request of Superior Court and all the other affiliates of the Criminal Justice Agency. We needed to further our capacity for the drug court in Ukiah, which also serves Willits and individuals from Fort Bragg who have the ability to come over the hill. So it would add one substance abuse therapist to increase capacity from 30 to 45.
Well, I've had ongoing concerns about this, and it's been, you know, discussed with the department, with one of our previous CEOs. It's been discussed with the court system on the equity issue, because there used to be a drug court in Fort Bragg, and there no longer is. And my understanding is that when additional funds were identified, that Fort Bragg would be reinstituted as a drug court. Now, to me, it's not acceptable that people have to have their transportation to access the drug court in Ukiah, because that, according to information I've read in the court reports, the task force or however they compile their professional staff, is that the courts also have concerns about that, because if you're eliminating people who don't have transportation, you're seriously impacting the equity of services concern. And I just don't understand how we're going in this direction when I put quite a bit of effort into this over the last 2 years. So did Supervisor Colfax. I felt that we had a commitment from the various entities, especially needing to draw down support from probation, on getting these services to the coast. I mean, again, here we are with allocating, and it was very clear in an email I received from the HHS director that this is an actual expansion of services. And so, again, we're back to the equity thing, and I feel like it's been brushed under the rug. Where are we with respect to coastal services? Because if we're going to be expanding them inland, when are we ever going to get to the point that we're going to be talking about getting them set up on the coast?
This grant will fund one substance abuse therapist. One substance abuse therapist alone would not create a drug court on the coast. It would require the probation officer, as you indicated, and they're also one of the groups in the criminal justice affiliates who requested that we do this expansion for Ukiah services. So it would take a lot more than just a substance abuse therapist to expand a drug court. We do have outpatient services on the coast currently, and we'll continue to offer those services.
And I understand that we do, but I remember we got a commitment in a meeting that I attended with county council some period of time ago, it was over a year ago, that we could get the internal support services, but we needed to address the probation services. Could this grant not be used to secure additional probation services for the coast? Because AODP already identified the therapeutic support services in Fort Bragg, and they were readily available. So the missing piece, my understanding was in the realm of probation.
Okay, this grant has already been written and has been submitted to the Department of Justice based on the request that we received from the court and the criminal justice affiliates. That's why we pursued it in this fashion. The deadline was January 10th. We didn't have time to bring it to the board prior to January 10th when it was written.
I would like to say, Kendall, that we are we are continually looking for additional funding to open up a drug court in the coastal area. We do recognize the need there. I did talk to the agency director about that and want to pursue additional funding for that area. This particular pot of funding was like she said, requested for another resource here, and probably not enough to establish the drug court on the coast, which was our concern. It wasn't enough to do what we needed over there.
Well, one of the ongoing discussions we had was regarding different models, that there were other models that were used in other rural counties. So possibly a drug court could be established on the coast that doesn't exactly mirror the one that's in Ukiah. So again, it's back to, it's always easier, and I remember this because I was a county employee. I was a county employee for 17 years. And this was repeatedly what the scenario that took place in one form or another is it was always expeditious or easier to apply for grants that you added on to services in the inland corridor. So once again, this is an example of how services are not being provided to the coast. And to me, this looked like an opportunity of getting the partners together and saying, hey, you know, it's great that we want an enhanced services here, but we don't have that basic service level in all parts of the county. So isn't it one of the operating principles of the department, the concept of regionalization? Is that something that the department embraces?
That is correct.
So using that theory or that way of looking at regionalization, which I understand the department director supports, how do we apply that to scenarios like this?
It sounds like we do need to reopen some discussions with the Department of Probation and other partners to see what we need to do, to see what the need is on the coast, how big the numbers are, what is the need, what is the population that needs to be served, and reevaluate that.
Well, I think that was a concern. I mean, there's not an economy of scale of providing services to small groups. That's recognized. So again, it's back to maybe there's another model that could be used. I don't think it warranted a full-time new probation officer, but yet every piece and every component from the information I directly received from the various players was that the only missing piece was probation, and probation didn't have the resources at the time, and it probably was a half-time position. So how could you possibly reformulate the positions? In other words, if people would get together to work to solve the problem, I don't think it's impossible to solve, instead of saying just, well, the staffing levels don't work, so the coast ends up without the resource. I mean, I really think this is something the executive office needs to fully embrace and take on and look at how do all of the county departments interface with each other, and how can the executive branch be a liaison to perhaps the courts if there are issues that need to be worked out. I mean, that's really where I thought it was going, so I was surprised to see this on the agenda in this format, seeing expansion of services where new money is identified, and yet the coast is just not, it's not being talked about.
And I do apologize for that. And I think you're right. We do need to look at another model, not as big as drug court, because the population isn't, the needs aren't there. So that is something that we need to investigate. And I apologize that you saw that in this format.
Supervisor Pinchot?
I don't see any reason to hold this up, but I really, you know, Supervisor Smith has a legitimate point, and I don't want to make part of my district sound like the sacrificial lamb, but it really, in light of what's happening with the court facilities in Willits, it's probably better have a drug court on the coast and one here in Ukiah rather than having one here in Ukiah and one in Willits. You know, because from Willits, it only takes 15, 20 minutes to drive Ukiah, where people from the coast, it takes over an hour to get here. So, you know, this whole issue of where the drug courts are needs to be looked at, because, and the reason I say that is because of the court changes, the physical changes that's happening with the facility in Willits. I mean, I want to have a drug court in Willits, but the reality of it is, I mean, to have no drug court on the coast and then two of them in the inland area is, you know, I have to admit that it don't seem to be the best location of the facility. So I think the whole issue needs to be revisited. I'm not saying that I want the drug court in Willits totally eliminated, but maybe there may